Okay, so 3.1, the second part of this is going to focus not so much on the physical side, but moving into the early stages of life. So we're going to start moving a little bit more chronologically and thinking about first now these earliest stages of life. So we're going to talk a little bit about cognitive development, take a little deeper of a dive in to understanding Jean Piaget, and then we'll talk about some of the early stages of social development through Erikson. So to start, this idea of a schema is also a theory of Jean Piaget in his understanding of cognitive development. And to understand all those stages, especially the early stages, is like infancy and childhood, you have to understand the framework within people are doing this. So as we are developing these new ideas, these new schemas, think about what it means or what like experiences newborns are going through, right? In the first 2 years of life, all we're doing is learning. Everything is a new experience, right? When children enter the world, they've got all of these new sounds, lights, feelings, tastes, sound, this crazy amount of information coming in at one time. And so for the first 2 years, everything is a new experience and everything is a new chance to learn something. And when you learn something for children, they're creating what's called a schema. A schema is a concept or framework that we are now organizing and interpreting our information through. Think of it as like a box, and we're putting all of the information that we learn about something into that box. And so when you're creating a schema, you're creating a new box to put information in. So we're going to use the example of a dog, right? So if you're a 2-year-old, say your family has a pet chihuahua, it's this cute, small little dog, and it's always walking around, and your parents teach you that that is a doggy or a dog. And so when it comes around, it's 4 legs, weighs 10 pounds or so. It's furry, it likes to lick you, you pet it, and it's great. And that is your schema for a dog. And so now you understand what dogs are, or you think you understand what dogs are. You have this schema that includes information like dogs have 4 legs. They have fur. They've got ears that are pointy, and they like to lick you. That's what a dog is. Okay, so you've created a schema, this new box of information for what a dog is. But one day you're walking through the park, and then here comes me, Mr. Whitehouse, turns the corner with my monstrosity of a dog, this 70-pound black, fluffy, furry thing, and you see that, and you're like, what is that thing? Right? That's insane. That is, I don't know what that is. You're like, Daddy, what is that? And your parents explain to you, we're like, well, that's a dog. And so you enter the state of disequilibrium because you're like, a dog weighs 10 pounds. A dog is like yellow with pointy ears, and it's smaller than me. That thing's huge. It's way bigger than me. And so you're left in this state of unease because what you previously knew turns out to be wrong. You thought a dog was only a chihuahua, but now you have to assimilate this information into new with all this new information that you have. So dogs aren't just small. Now dogs can also be different colors. Dogs can also have floppy ears. Dogs can have curly hair. And so you're expanding your definition of what it means to be a dog, right? So that box of information for a dog, now you're putting all kinds of new stuff in there. Okay, so now it's not just a dog is furry. Dogs are also can be large. They can have different colored hair. They can have different types of ears, but you still understand for the most part that they're 4 legs, furry, lots of different colors, all that stuff. Cool, got it. You now assimilated different types of dogs and you understand now, your scheme of dogs expands. And so you think you've got it. You continue to walk in the park and you turn the corner and someone in their lap has a cat and you see that and you're like, okay, I got this. That one's also different, but it's pretty close to a chihuahua. It's got 4 legs, pointy ears. It's cute. Right? It has hair. Yeah, that's a dog. And you point at it and you tell your parents, that's a dog. And they're like, no, that's a cat. And at this point, you're like, I don't know anything. So you re-enter this state of disequilibrium where you're uncomfortable. You're like, well, how is that a cat? It's just a dog. And they're like, no, that one's a cat. Right? That one's a cat because it is smaller, skinnier. It likes to climb trees. It has sharper talons, often sharper teeth, different things. They move differently. And so now you're creating these different understandings of what it is. right? Dogs go bark, and when that cat all of a sudden says meow, you're like, that's not a dog sound. Your parents say, that's a cat. And so now you define differently. You have to create a whole new box. And so this process is called accommodation. You're creating a new box of information for cats, not for dogs. Okay, so schema is creating a box in the first place of a framework that you can organize your information. Assimilation is like an expansion of that box. So you're putting new information into that category. And accommodation is saying this information can't go into this box. And so I have to create a new box for that. Okay. So over the course of our cognitive development, we're creating those schemas. And we're doing that in the early stages through interactions with our environment, interactions with our physical environment in the way that we, would pet a dog, see a cat, hear what the sounds they're making. So we're interacting with that environment and we're learning along the way. So remember those 4 stages? We've talked about these: the sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stage, each one developing our kind of cognitive abilities. So starting off in those first 2 years, in infants and childhood, they're going through this sensory motor stage. Again, everything is about interaction with the environment. They are using their sensations, crawling around, figuring out the world, and they're, as they go, developing schemas. Right? They're developing and understanding, and they're learning things. So when a baby develops fears, whenever something makes them cry, they will see that again and they'll cry again the next time because they're understanding and creating schemas about things that are good, about things that make them happy, about things that might make them cry. And so they're developing these schemas and they're assimilating information into this at a crazy and rapid rate because everything they're doing is new. They're also developing over the course of this time this idea of object permanence, that things exist even when babies can't see them, which is why, again, peekaboo is so exciting for babies, because when you're playing peekaboo, they're not just like making a silly face. They are amazed that you reappeared because they can't conceptualize that when something isn't in their line of sight, that it's not gone forever. Object permanence, they now believe that when they see something, it's actually there, even if it's out of their sight. So out of sensory motor stage, they've developed object permanence. They're moving into their pre-operational stage. Around 2-ish to 6 or 7, they're very egocentric. Everything is they only think about what they can see, right? So if someone they can't think about someone else's perspective, right? If they are looking at something, and so in this example, if you want to go back and watch these videos later, you got this cute little kid sitting on the opposite side of this volcano, and the girl says, what do you see when you look at this? And there's like a little bitty green figure on the other side of the volcano that she can't see. And he says, a green man. And she says, well, what am I going to see when I look at it? And he says, you're going to see a green man. Right? He can't consider that she doesn't have his perspective. Right? It's the reason that kids stand in front of the TV. They don't realize that you can't see right through them. They can see, and so they think you can see. So they're very egocentric. They can only think from their own perspective. And they also lack conservation, meaning that when things are spread out, you see here these like coins spread out. As a 5 or 6-year-old, you haven't quite grasped this idea yet that one of them, that they are the same amount, right? That these 5 coins and these 5 coins are actually the same amount of coins. But this little girl in this example would say, oh, there's more on the top, right? Even though there's clearly not, but she hasn't developed that. And she thinks the larger it is, the more it is, even if they're clearly the same amount. Okay? So quantity is the same despite a change in shape. So you develop that as you move into this concrete operational stage where you develop conservation and you're able to serve simple math computations. You can add, you can subtract, so you can learn to, on a basic level, divide and multiply, but you can't yet develop abstract and hypothetical thinking. You can't think long term, right? Ask a 10-year-old, how old do you think I am? They'll probably say 88 or 16, right? They can't think long term. They can't conceptually understand what a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old, like that long-term thought's really difficult for them. But as they move into their early teenage years, into adulthood, we really are all kind of thinking the same way. Our brain is developed to the point where we're constructing abstract thought. We're thinking long term. We're planning in such a way that we can think about the future. So those are the 4 Piaget stages. Those are the ones you're going to have to think about yourself within the construct of. Okay, so other characters you need to know in these early stages of development. This guy Lev Vygotsky, he develops this concept of a social development theory. We don't talk about Vygotsky quite as much as the others. It's a little different than the Erikson theory, which gets all of the attention. But he has this theory, which is been conflicted. A lot of people have kind of pushed back on these, but his belief is that social learning comes before developing cultural influences. And so social learning is the first thing that people do. And he thought that language is the building block for all of this. He thought that language was the first thing we develop before we develop any real problem solving and cognition. Piaget has kind of won out in the debate between these two, and that cognition often can kind of come before language. What we've shown is that this isn't quite accurate, that kids think more hypothetically, right? We think symbolically in the preoperational stage. We don't need words to be able to describe things. We describe things with symbols, whereas Vygotsky believed they weren't really solving problems until they develop inner speech. Okay, so this is just kind of a theory of cognition, although one of the things that he has developed that has stuck around is this ZPD, or zone of proximal development. This is big in educational psychology. And it's this idea that learners and cognitive development happens best in this zone, and it's the balance between things that you can complete without help and things you cannot complete no matter what, right? If I were to hand a 12-year-old a derivative to solve, right? It's like, okay, so do this advanced calculus problem. Even with help, they're probably not going to learn it. And so it's too hard and they're going to quit, right? We would never be able to do this. But if I handed a 12-year-old a basic math problem, they're not going to get smarter, right? If I handed, what's 5 plus 8, right? They're not going to do that. So instead, with a 12-year-old, what we're probably going to be doing is more things like advanced addition and subtraction, right? You're going to start working with binomials. So for the first time, you're really looking at a little bit more advanced problems, right? You're introducing the X and Y and things like that. But you're not really freaking kids out yet with really, really advanced things. So things where you can do things with just a little bit of help is going to push you to the next level so you can learn more effectively. So finding this is an important step for anyone, all right? I challenge people to think about what is your zone of proximal development. Don't hang out here just because it's easy, but don't challenge yourself too hard because you won't get anything done. Finally, the other forms of social development in these early stages, Erikson, we go through trust, autonomy, and the initiative stages. So the first 18 months, you go through trust versus mistrust. Again, do you learn that you can trust your environment and trust people around you? Were your parents there when you needed them? Were they feeding you at a normal schedule? Or do you learn that people shouldn't be trusted, that they might drop you, or that they won't feed you when you cry out? Erikson believed that you held on to these throughout your life. Second stage, 18 months to 3 years, autonomy versus shame and doubt. People develop either the ability that they can do things for themselves, or are they shameful? Are they full of doubt? Potty training is a big part of this, and that kids can learn to go to the potty by themselves, go to the bathroom by themselves, or are they filled with shame because they can't control their urges, can't control themselves? And then 3 to 5, initiative versus guilt. This is really kind of focused on the earliest years of being able to do things yourself, right? You're like, I can tie my own shoes. I can handle myself. I don't need any help. And so that's versus guilt, and where you recognize that you're not actually able to do things on your own in the same way. So that's it for the day. Next class, we're going to talk about 3.2, infant and childhood social development, a little bit more, and the way that people interact with their parents. Right, that is it for the day.